Every 3 days in America, a baby dies at the hands of their own parent. But even among these heartbreaking statistics, what happened on a quiet residential street in Pemberton Township, New Jersey on January 16, 2015 stands out as one of the most shocking cases of infanticide in recent memory. On that Friday evening, 22-year-old Hyphernkemberly Dorvilier drove to Simontown Road with a can of WD-40 spray and a lighter. Just hours after giving birth, alone in her family bathroom, what she did next would land her in prison for 30 years and leave an entire community asking how something so unthinkable could happen. But before we dive into the horrific details of this case, we need to understand who Hyphernkemberly Dorvilier was and how a young woman managed to hide one of life's most visible conditions for 9 full months. Because this isn't just a story about one terrible night, this is about months of secrecy, desperation, and a system that somehow failed to catch a woman in crisis. Hyphernkemberly Dorvilier had an unusual name that reflected her family's complex immigrant story. Her mother, Juana Sully, came from Haiti but gave birth to Dorvilier and her 2 sisters in Canada. The family had eventually settled in Pemberton Township, a working-class community about 30 miles east of Philadelphia. Some of the girls had graduated from Pemberton Township High School, though records don't confirm whether Dorvilier was among them. Her mother, Juana, worked providing care for people with developmental disabilities, a job that requires compassion, patience, and dedication to helping vulnerable people. It makes what happened next even more difficult to understand. Dorvilier lived with her mother and younger sister in their split-level home, sharing close quarters where privacy would have been limited. Yet somehow, for 9 months, she managed to conceal her growing pregnancy from the 2 people who knew her best. Think about the mental gymnastics this would have required. The careful positioning, the loose clothing, the constant vigilance about how she sat, stood, and moved. This wasn't just denial. This was an elaborate, sustained deception that would have taken incredible energy to maintain. But hiding a pregnancy isn't just about physical changes. There are doctor's appointments to avoid or explain away. There are mood changes, food cravings, morning sickness. There's the growing reality that in 9 months, a baby is coming whether you're ready or not. For Dorvilier, each day that passed without telling anyone meant the problem became bigger, more complicated, and harder to solve. Then came January 16, 2015. Alone in her family bathroom, 22-year-old Hyphernkemberly Dorvilier gave birth to a baby girl. The umbilical cord and placenta were still attached, evidence that she received no medical attention during or after delivery. This was a woman who had just experienced one of the most physically traumatic events a human body can endure. Yet, within hours, she had made a decision that would destroy 2 lives. Police responded to a call about a fire in the middle of a residential road in Pemberton Township. When first responders arrived, they found something that would haunt them forever. The baby was found wrapped in towels and papers, with the umbilical cord and placenta still attached. This wasn't just a case of abandonment, this was something far more deliberate and devastating. The infant had suffered 3rd-degree burns over 60% of her tiny body. Emergency crews rushed the baby to a Philadelphia hospital, but she died just 2 hours after arrival. The medical team had done everything they could, but the injuries were simply too severe. In those 2 hours, doctors and nurses fought desperately to save a life that had been deliberately destroyed. Just hours after it began, the investigation moved quickly because the evidence was overwhelming. Burlington County prosecutors charged Dorvilier with murder and jailed her on $500,000 bail. The forensic evidence painted a clear picture of what had happened. Witnesses had seen the fire. The WD-40 can was found at the scene. And eventually, faced with undeniable proof, Dorvilier would confess to what she had done. But this case raises questions that go far beyond one woman's actions. How do we explain what seems unexplainable? How does a mother become capable of killing her own child in such a brutal way? The answers aren't simple, and they force us to confront some uncomfortable truths about mental health, social pressure, and the support systems that are supposed to catch people before they fall this far. Initially, Dorvilier pleaded not guilty to 1st-degree murder and 2nd-degree endangering the welfare of a child. Her defense team even tried to enter a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, claiming that their client was not mentally capable at the time of the crime. This raised crucial questions about her mental state. Was this the act of someone suffering From postpartum psychosis, a rare but serious condition that can cause new mothers to lose touch with reality. Or was this a calculated decision made by someone who simply didn't want to be a mother and saw murder as her only option? The insanity defense is rarely successful, and it requires extensive psychological evaluation to prove that a defendant genuinely didn't understand right from wrong at the time of their crime. In Dorvilier's case, the methodical nature of her actions, gathering supplies, driving to a location, carrying out the act, suggested someone who understood exactly what she was doing. Even if we can't understand why she chose to do it. If you're as shocked by these cases as I am, hit that subscribe button because unfortunately, we're just getting started. The legal proceedings took over a year as lawyers and mental health experts tried to make sense of an act that seemed to defy all logic. In February 2016, Dorvilier changed her plea to guilty for aggravated manslaughter, dropping the original murder charge. This plea deal meant she was acknowledging that she had killed her baby, but not with premeditation. The legal system was trying to make sense of an act that seemed to defy all logic and maternal instinct. The distinction between murder and manslaughter might seem technical, but it's important. Murder requires premeditation, a plan to kill. Manslaughter acknowledges that death occurred, but suggests it happened in the heat of the moment or under extreme emotional distress. By accepting a manslaughter plea, the court was recognizing that whatever drove Dorvilier to kill her baby, it might not have been a cold, calculated decision made days or weeks in advance. On Friday, April 22, 2016, Hyphernkemberly Dorvilier was sentenced to 30 years in prison. The courtroom was packed with people trying to understand how a mother could do this to her own child. 30 years means she won't be eligible for parole until she's in her 50s. By then, an entire generation will have grown up never knowing about the baby girl who lived for just 2 hours on a January night in New Jersey. During sentencing, the judge had to balance justice for a dead infant with the recognition that Dorvilier herself was a young woman whose life was now effectively over. 30 years is a significant sentence, reflecting the severity of taking an innocent life, but it's not life without parole, suggesting the court believed there might be some possibility of rehabilitation. Some chance that the woman who committed this act could eventually become someone different. But this case raises bigger questions that go far beyond one woman's actions. How many other women are hiding pregnancies right now, feeling trapped and desperate with no one to turn to? The statistics are more troubling than you might think. According to research, about 1 in 2,500 pregnancies are concealed from family and friends. And some of these hidden pregnancies end in tragedy. Here's what makes this case even more tragic. New Jersey has had safe haven laws since 2000, specifically designed to prevent exactly this kind of situation. New Jersey's Safe Haven Infant Protection Act allows parents or someone acting on their behalf to leave an unharmed baby less than 30 days old with staff at any hospital, police station, fire station, ambulance, or rescue squad staffed 24 hours a day. No names or records are required, and there's no fear of arrest or prosecution. As of September 2023, 90 newborns have been surrendered under New Jersey's safe haven law. That's 90 babies who are alive today because someone made the difficult but responsible decision to give them up safely. According to national statistics, of 105 children abandoned in public places in 1998, 33 were found dead. Incidents of child abandonment in public places rose by more than 60% in the 1990s, which is exactly why states began passing safe haven laws. So why didn't Dorvilier use these legal options? Maybe she didn't know about safe haven laws. Maybe she was too scared, or too overwhelmed to think clearly. Maybe the months of secrecy had created a psychological trap where admitting the pregnancy felt impossible, even to save her baby's life. Or maybe, in those crucial hours after giving birth, panic took over completely, and rational thought became impossible. We also have to consider the cultural and social pressures that might have contributed to her decision. In some families and communities, an unplanned pregnancy, especially for an unmarried young woman, can feel like a source of overwhelming shame. The fear of disappointing family, the worry about financial struggles, the terror of having your life completely changed by a responsibility you don't feel ready for. These pressures can drive people to make choices they never would have imagined themselves capable of. This doesn't excuse what Dorvilier did. Nothing can excuse the deliberate murder of a helpless infant. But understanding the pressures and circumstances that lead to these tragedies is the only way we can hope to prevent them in the future. If we just dismiss cases like this as the actions of a monster, We miss the opportunity to identify warning signs and provide help before another baby dies. The psychological impact of hiding a pregnancy for 9 months can't be underestimated. Living with that level of denial and secrecy takes a tremendous mental toll. By the time labor begins, a woman in this situation isn't thinking clearly. She's been living in a state of constant anxiety and fear. And when the moment of truth arrives, she might be psychologically incapable of making rational decisions. There's also the physical trauma of giving birth alone. Without medical care or support, the human body goes through enormous changes during childbirth, including hormone fluctuations that can affect mood and decision. Add the physical exhaustion, possible blood loss, and shock of delivery to an already fragile mental state, and you have conditions that can lead to catastrophic judgment errors. But even understanding these factors, we're left with the central question: how does a mother become capable of burning her own child alive? Some crimes are so far outside normal human behavior that they force us to confront the darkest possibilities of what people are capable of under extreme circumstances. This wasn't a moment of anger or a tragic accident. This was a deliberate act that required planning and follow-through even as a helpless infant suffered. The forensic details of the case paint a picture that's almost impossible to comprehend. Dorvilier had to gather the WD-40 and lighter. She had to wrap her newborn daughter in towels and papers. She had to drive to Simontown Road. She had to douse her baby with accelerant and set her on fire. At any point in this sequence, she could have stopped. She could have driven to a hospital instead. She could have called 911. She could have left the baby safely at a fire station or police station. Instead, she chose murder. The baby girl lived for 2 hours after being found, fighting for her life in a Philadelphia hospital. Doctors and nurses worked desperately to save her. But burns over 60% of a newborn's body are simply too severe to survive. In those 2 hours, this tiny girl experienced more pain and suffering than most people face in a lifetime. She died without ever knowing her mother's love, without ever feeling safe or wanted, tortured to death by the person who should have protected her above all others. What we do know is that a baby girl who should be 9 years old today, maybe starting 4th grade, maybe learning to play soccer or piano, never got that chance. She never took her first steps, never said her first word, never experienced a single day of childhood joy. Her entire existence was 9 months in the womb, followed by 2 hours of agony. And a young woman who should have been building her life, instead, destroyed it in one horrific act that lasted just minutes but will define the rest of her existence. This case reminds us that behind every shocking headline is a complex web of circumstances, mental health struggles, and missed opportunities for intervention. While we can never excuse what Hyphernkemberly Dorvilier did, we can learn from it. We can make sure more people know about safe haven laws. We can reduce the stigma around unplanned pregnancies. We can create better support systems for women who feel they have nowhere to turn. At least 20 newborns have been abandoned or killed in New Jersey since 1997, which is exactly why safe haven laws were created in the first place. Every one of these tragedies represents a failure of our social safety net, a missed opportunity to save a life. In Dorvilier's case, the system had already provided a legal, safe alternative. The law was there. The resources were available, but somehow, the message didn't reach someone who desperately needed to hear it. Today, Hyphernkemberly Dorvilier sits in a New Jersey prison, serving a 30-year sentence for aggravated manslaughter. She's now in her early 30s, and if she serves her full sentence, she'll be in her 50s when she's released. That's assuming she survives prison, where inmates who hurt children often face violence from other prisoners. Her life, for all practical purposes, is over. The frightened 22-year-old, who made one terrible decision, destroyed not just her baby's future, but her own. The question that haunts everyone who learns about this case is simple: could it have been prevented? If Dorvilier had known about safe haven laws, would her daughter be alive today? If she had felt safe telling her family about her pregnancy, could they have helped her through it? If there had been better mental health resources available, could someone have recognized the warning signs of a woman in crisis? We'll never know the answers to these questions. But we can honor the memory of that baby girl by making sure other women know they have options. We can talk openly about safe haven laws. We can reduce the shame and stigma around unplanned pregnancies. We can create communities where women feel safe asking for help instead of hiding in fear. Until desperation drives them to unthinkable acts. The baby girl on Simontown Road never got to have a name or a future. But maybe, If we pay attention to what this case teaches us, we can prevent other families from experiencing this kind of unimaginable tragedy. That's the best way to honor the memory of a life that was far too short, and far too cruelly ended, because somewhere out there, right now, there might be another young woman hiding a pregnancy, feeling trapped and desperate, convinced that she has no way out. And maybe, if we do our job right, she'll know that there are people who will help her. Legal ways to ensure her baby's safety. And alternatives to the kind of tragedy that destroyed 2 lives on a January night in New Jersey. Next time on Accused, we're diving into another case that shocked a small community, but I'll let you discover that story for yourself. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.